Hey everyone, Nick here. I wanted to get a little bit more cerebral in this video than I've gotten on a lot of other videos, and I wanted to talk about team building. Now this isn't specific to make.com, it's not specific to automation. This is specific to running a business. And I really wanted to give this topic the attention and the coverage that I feel it deserves, because as somebody that's operated a business now with between 15 and 20 people in it, this is one of the most important things that you can get right. And it's also one of the most important things that you can get wrong. So your ability to build a team, and more importantly, a culture, really is your ability to build a business, in my humble estimation. And yeah, I got some thoughts on it. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, stay tuned and let's get into it. So I have here a little Notion document that I've written just a few thoughts on team building and how to build a strong, successful culture with. And one thing that I found while I was writing this out is that to really build a successful culture, it's actually not so much about what you do, it's more about what you don't do. And there are a couple of extremely simple and very straightforward tweaks that you just need to make to the way that you manage people to essentially just build like an awesome culture that's organic, that is filled with good emotions, and that ultimately does what any business should be doing, which is getting shit done. Now, these are learnings that I've taken from a variety of books. These are learnings I've taken from a variety of businesses that I've worked in, personally operated or operated as a consultant. And it's really interesting because in my time, building automations and now more doing operations for companies and partnering and that sort of thing, it's just crazy that the diversity of cultures and diversity of organizations and organizational values that I see. I mean, I've probably seen or worked with in some way, shape, or form now at least 40, maybe 50 businesses, maybe 40 businesses, I want to say, and I've seen everything from crazy, cruel top-down management practices to some extremely hyper-efficient bottom-up machines. And I've seen everything in between as well. And I've picked up all of that information and basically synthesized it into what I would consider a pretty solid operating roadmap for culture building. And so I'm not going to share that roadmap with you, but what I want to do in this video is just talk about the three big things that you should avoid if you're trying to build a strong culture and moreover a strong team. So, thing number one is to praise in public and reprimand in private. Now, a lot of you guys have probably heard this before. If this is the first time that you guys are hearing it, it's okay. Praising in public and reprimanding in private is quite simple. It basically means that when you have a win to share, you do it in front of as many people as possible. And when you have something negative to say, or a piece of feedback, or a piece of constructive criticism to deliver, you do that in private. The whole idea behind praising in public and reprimanding in private is essentially just building up a flywheel of positivity and making sure that your culture is just always full steam ahead. Let's go, go, go. This is also, for some weird reason, literally the most common failure mode that I see in culture building, where I was just on a Slack the other day where there was some report or something that one person in the team had delivered. And then in a 20-person public Slack channel, he just proceeded to berate this lovely writer who had really poured their heart and their soul into this piece, just in front of 19 other people. And I just want you to think about it from that person's perspective. Well, really just from a human perspective, we've evolved for hundreds of thousands of years to have social shame be one of the greatest motivators and also the worst self-esteem impactors of all time. Our ability to feel confident in ourselves and our ability to get things done basically rests directly on our perceived opinions of the other people in our lives. If you want people to feel happy and to feel motivated and to feel encouraged to do a good job, berating them in front of 20 other people is no way to do it. They're going to not respect you. They're not going to respect a lot of the other people in the team, and essentially just going to shrink away from it. So yeah, I mentioned here, nothing, and I mean nothing, will ruin how a team member feels about you and themselves and the company faster than just telling them they did a shit job in front of 20 other people. So avoid that wherever possible. My personal rule of thumb here, just from a management POV, is I usually do either a weekly or a monthly one-on-one with my directs. If you haven't heard the term direct before, it basically just means the person that you're managing. And usually managers can have anywhere from 3 up to maybe 10 directs before it starts getting unwieldy. So, on my weekly or maybe my monthly one-on-ones, if there are any issues I see with a person's performance, I'll just bring it up then. And I'll bring it up when it's just me and it's just them. There's no other, owl in the room listening. There's no observer, and there's really nobody to stop them from laying down or laying out why they feel how they feel about their performance and maybe some strategies they think that they could use to make it better. You really want to eliminate like the social status climbing or like the virtue signaling as much as possible from any sort of work interaction. Virtue signaling and social status climbing, this sort of thing is like a cancer in organizations, and it's just a byproduct of being human. It's going to pop up regardless of where you are, what company you're in, or what you're doing. So you need to be cognizant of that. But when you're delivering constructive criticism or feedback, you're doing so because you want them to improve, right? And just the best way to make sure that they take or soak up 100% of that improvement is just doing it in a private place that's not in front of anybody else. So that's number one. That's what I would say is probably the biggest failure case, and just something that most of you guys can eliminate pretty easily in your own company. Praise in public, reprimand in private. The second principle that I find extremely important is it's not actually about keeping everybody happy. And I think a lot of first-time founders and novice entrepreneurs tend to believe that in order to run a successful team, everybody on the team needs to be happy. That is not true at all. Happiness isn't the end-all be-all. If you're attempting to create or run or build a successful organization, happiness should be somewhere on your list for sure, at least top 5, but it definitely shouldn't be number 1. Performance should be number 1. Fulfillment should be number 1, way more than happiness, right? The happiness is something that's important, but it's not like the main KPI or metric that you should be optimizing for. But unfortunately, because a lot of novice and young managers dread conflict and that sort of thing, they'll usually avoid anything that could disrupt team member happiness wherever possible. And when you do that for long enough, your team just gets less motivated, they get lazier, they become lower performers, and it's just sort of like a byproduct of humanity. If we're always happy and everything's amazing, eventually we won't be. Eventually we'll grow dissatisfied with what we're doing. And a lot of the time, if you're working 8 hours a day, you'll project a lot of that onto the work that you're doing. So yeah, management isn't actually about keeping everybody happy. The Effective Manager is a great book, by the way. If you guys haven't picked it up or anything like that, highly recommend. In it, the author, whose name I'm not remembering, Mark Horstman, in it, he makes an amazing case for the 2 different types of stress. So there's distress, which is obviously when somebody is panicking, they're anxious, they're emotional, they're feeling a lot of pressure essentially. And when somebody's distressed, they obviously don't perform very well. But there's also another form of stress, which is called eustress. And this is a real word. If you look it up and you've never seen it before, it's going to pop up like this. And it's going to tell you that eustress is a moderate or normal amount of psychological stress that's actually interpreted as being beneficial, not necessarily detractive or destructive. The whole idea behind eustress is like when you're ideally perfectly stimulated. There's a principle here, and I think it's like office performance or something like that, called the Yerkes-Dodson curve. And essentially this was done, I think, well over 50 or 60 years ago now. But they did an experiment where they just modeled how people perform in response to increasing levels of stress. And what they found was when stress was really low, like down here at the bottom left-hand corner, performance was low. When stress was sort of higher, performance was higher. When stress was sort of at this optimal point, then performance was at this optimal point. And then after, as you proceeded further and further to the right of the stress graph, performance then started dipping down. And so nowadays this is referred to as the inverted U curve, or the Yerkes-Dodson law. And we use this in organizational management principles all the time, because the point isn't necessarily to just let everybody be happy and pat them on the head and give them team hugs or whatever the hell a lot of these super crazy mega progressive companies are doing nowadays. It's to allow them and help them to do big things with their lives. People want to improve their careers, they want to achieve large things, and as a manager, your job is to stress them or stimulate them to the optimal point when they can. So what does this actually mean in practice? Well, it just essentially just means having boundaries. It means that caring about the performance of your staff members isn't like a negative. Sure, you should also care about their happiness, but you should care about their performance first and foremost. A lot of the time they want to do really good things. They just need somebody that's constantly monitoring how they're doing on maybe a weekly or monthly basis and offering suggestions, advice, tips, and that sort of thing to allow them to get better. Sorry, I'm just getting a call. Let me just mute that. There are other ways to do this as well. You can foster competitiveness in your staff members. And I don't mean competitiveness as like, hey, if you guys don't do this, you're going to get dropped. I mean like positive competitiveness where you're offering some sorts of prizes or some sorts of like additional bonuses or something like that if somebody does a really good job. These are all forms of positive stress or eustress that allow you to take people to the next level essentially as a manager. And there are things that I think about a lot. Personal story time, caring about people's happiness used to be the most important thing in the world to me as a manager. And because I did that and I put that first and foremost, my team never grew. I was never capable of paying people what I thought they actually deserved. I was only capable of paying people what I could at that moment in time. My company was incapable of thriving. Really, by not putting people's performance first and foremost, like their economic productivity per se, I was hurting them. I was hurting their livelihoods. I was hurting all the other great people that I could be helping. And so, when you put somebody's happiness first, it may seem like you're doing them a solid and that you really care about them and that sort of thing. But if anything, it's selfish because you're just usually afraid of conflict. You're usually just afraid of holding that person to a standard. And in the long run, you're not going to be helping that person. You're going to be hurting them. So yeah, it's not actually about keeping everybody happy. It's about making sure that they perform as well as humanly possible. And it's about essentially bringing out the best version of themselves. The last principle that I find a lot of companies miss is this notion of freedom and responsibility. And I got this from Reed Hastings. This is the founder and CEO, I believe, of Netflix, who wrote a fantastic book called No Rules, Rules, which basically just broke down Netflix's counterintuitive management system. And this is something that, when the book came out, everybody's like, there's no way that Netflix actually manages like that. That's stupid. Ain't no way. And then everybody at Netflix was like, oh yeah, that's actually like our jobs. That's our day-to-day. And I'm not going to go into detail about Netflix's specific management practices, but they do have a couple of unorthodox things. They do like completely free, unlimited vacation. You can clock out whenever the hell you want. They do things like they pay people a ton of money. They pay people like incentive bonuses. They pay way more money than a lot of other people would for a similar quality or skill position. They give people way more flexibility in their job than most other people would, right? But there are a couple more things on that. I'm just not going to beat a dead horse. The two things that I think apply to us, as young entrepreneurs or people attempting to grow a successful business, maybe in the agency space or the automation space or whatever business you might be running, is that, you can think of a company as basically operating in one of two diametrically opposed ways. The first is the company with hawkish micromanagers that sticks everybody in cubicles and then roams up and down the halls, constantly looking over everybody's shoulder to make sure that they perform well. This is a company that tries to squeeze every last drop of efficiency out of their staff members. And I'm not going to lie to you, this shit works. There's reasons why companies do this. When they implement strong top-down management practices like this, companies actually do better. I mean, if you think about it, like if they didn't, then nobody would be doing it, right? So the whole cubicle thing with the roving managers, like, yeah, that shit works. That's why they're doing it. But it's important to look at the time scale that works on. And I think after you've run a company for a little while, you realize that does work and you do squeeze every last drop of efficiency and value out of people, but you do so in the short term. In the long term, that sort of mindset and that sort of environment leads to usually slightly higher turnover rates. It leads to people being less satisfied with their work. It leads to people over a long period of time performing less than they could otherwise, even though in a short period of time, they tend to perform well and are more detail-oriented, that sort of thing. And generally speaking, I want you to think of this as like a credit card where, you are swiping and then you are taking performance away from the future of your business so that you can use it today. So I'm not saying that, this is a terrible approach and companies shouldn't be doing this. Like, we're talking the economy here, right? So if you need a bunch of cubicle rats constantly running up and down and staring over people's shoulders to make money, I mean, yeah, there's a reason why people are doing it and I totally understand. But you're sacrificing the long-term growth and long-term success of a company by engaging in those sorts of practices. And this is what Reed Hastings talks about a lot. He talks about like the difference between the super structured, regimented environment and then what he calls the no rules, how no rules rule, which is what he recommends. So there's that first idea where everybody's super regimented and super put into a box and constantly monitored and that sort of thing. And you squeeze more short-term productivity out of it. And the opposite approach, and the approach that this guy uses, and the approach that I use, and the approach that a bunch of other successful agency owners use, is where instead of restricting people, you basically just give them a ton of freedom, usually way more freedom than you would feel comfortable doing. You define the what in their jobs, so you define like the specific task they need to be doing, but you don't actually tell them how to do that job. You sort of leave that up to them. And the idea here with giving people freedom and autonomy to do their job and hopefully do really good at it, I mean, I would hope so, is typically if you just hire really good people, like really smart, really talented, really high performers, and you pay them really well, they'll solve the vast majority of problems themselves within a month or two better than you would have been able to show them how as a manager if you had just tried to, box them into some system immediately. And so in that way, you basically get to leverage their human capital to make the processes of your business and of that specific task more efficient. You also get to compound on the cultural benefits and the general satisfaction that people feel working in your company. Because when you hire a bunch of, admittedly, higher paid professionals that are really stoked and really smart and really happy with what they do, they tend to collaborate much more effectively than people that are sort of boxed and isolated and given a routine list of SOPs to follow. And so autonomy in this way actually costs you more in the short term because you're not squeezing every last drop of efficiency with templated SOPs and roving bands of hawkish managers. But in the long run, it massively improves your productivity. And it also allows you to retain people significantly more. So you spend less on hiring and on HR and turnover and that sort of thing. And then also it usually allows you to hire for larger and more senior managerial roles from just within the company. And usually that person has significantly less training that they need to do because they've just spent all this time autonomously operating well within your business. And so this is sort of the trade-off. You kind of have two types of businesses. You have that dystopian 1984 Orwellian dream where you're just making a shitload of money, but you're doing it at the expense of satisfaction and of long-term growth. Or you have this bustling, progressive utopia where people are autonomous and they can do whatever the heck they want, have unlimited vacation time, get paid $300K a year, whatever. And you're sort of banking on that helping you in the long term, which, if you look at just any major tech company now, this is what they all do. It usually does. Just look at the stock prices. So yeah, these are the two real differences here. And these are the two paradoxical ways that Reed Hastings talks about companies operating. Anywho, I have personally used these three principles to grow what I would consider an extremely thriving, happy, successful business with an amazing culture where everybody in my business is a high performer. Everybody in my business really enjoys being there. We hold people accountable. We don't just, hold their hand through the entire process. We let them spread their wings and we let them get better. And it's just been one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. So just by following these three principles and of course being awesome, I think that you could probably do it too. Okay, I hope this helps and you found value in team building or at least some of the more nuanced aspects of culture. In particular, I find that Reed Hastings No Rules book to be extremely valuable. So make sure to pick that up if you guys haven't already. If you guys have any questions about team building, if you're team building in your own automation agency or maybe some other service agency or even a SaaS company, and I didn't answer one of your questions or you just have some additional thoughts to share, please leave them down below as comments. I'd be more than happy to touch on that. If you guys like the video, please click that like button, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching.